Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello, and thank you for listening to the Answer is Yes podcast. Appreciate everybody. Again, I always appreciate the notes I get and the feedback. We've had some wonderful guests, and if you remember me saying on many occasions, I'm trying to bring more guests that will bring value to your businesses or ways that you can ramp up, or in today's guest, in his world, a way that you can monetize maybe your ideas or putting a new business out if you're a specialist in something or if you have something to offer. So today I've got Greg Anderson on the line from Jedari. Greg, good to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks for allowing me to be on and spend a little time getting to know you. Hopefully bringing in lots of cool just thoughts. You know, anytime we're on a podcast, anytime we're reading a book, anytime we're doing pieces, if we just get to pull one really cool nugget that changes the trajectory about what we're doing 1%, man, it's worth it the whole time. So if I can do anything that's delivering that one nugget, we'll probably do a few more, but delivering that one nugget to people.
I usually get a few out of them, but you know that brings up a really good point. It's just like reading a book. If I can get one paragraph or sentence or something of value out of a book, maybe the other 900 pages don't do anything for me, but that one page that changes. And that's what we hope to accomplish through these shows. And by the way, to my listeners, we want you to get value out of these calls so that you can transition your life, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And if you're paying attention, man, we've really delivered on that in the last year. Greg, there's a few things I want to talk to you about before we jump into Jedari, because I know that's going to consume most of our time because I'm such a fan right now. But a little bit of background on yourself. This doesn't have to be a long, drawn out, tell me your story type thing. But I also realize that you're a pretty spiritual guy and you've made some pretty amazing travels that I've seen. So maybe touch a little bit on who Greg is, because I really want to know how you landed in Sean Whalen's world, forming this company with him.
Sure. Well, I can start that one. That's pretty easy. That's the Sean Whalen conversation. Sean's former spouse and my former spouse went to high school together. So back in the day, while he was married to her and I was married to mine, they introduced us and we were both in the mortgage banking world. Wanted to do some business, hung out a lot, didn't until the collapse of the real estate market. And then we both went into real estate pretty heavily. He created a company, I funded that company, and it just built from there. So we've had this ongoing friendship and business relationship on and off for 16, 17 years now.
Wow. You know, I always say that there's good that comes out of every bad, you know, and it seems like you guys have a great relationship and you formed something special here. So thanks for the background on that, because I was curious.
Yeah. And we've had our downs. Like we've had some times where money was tight and issues that had happened. And there were opportunities, without going into detail, where you could rip relationships apart, or, you know, two people, whether it's in a marriage or a business relationship, where you can own the part that you brought to it, own that half of that equation is you. Maybe you take a break for a little while, but when you come back, you're stronger. I tend to do more business with people I've known for a long time than new people when we're building something, because seeing what happens when somebody goes up and down and through the mud really helps you understand how to work with them in the future. So
yeah, what a really good point. We just want to scrap those relationships, but there's so much value in coming out of that mud together, you know, and looking back and laughing on it. Like, hey, remember we went to the mats over that stupid thing now, and you're better for it.
Yeah, for sure. We've definitely made millions together and lost millions together. So hey, it just is.
Cycle of life. So beyond your real estate background and things, you know, obviously in the tech industry now, I'd call it, maybe you do as well, but where did your travels go to get you here?
So tech actually started for me back in 1999. I was a contractor going, there's got to be something more for me. I was a single dad at this point, child support, the whole thing's trying to figure out life. And decided that I would go back to school. I took a job at Microsoft being a technical support while I went to school at nights and bartended on the weekends, kind of just pay for the whole thing. And that led me through a lot. It led me through a few years of just solid tech, right? And then the dot-com bubble bursts. And that's when finances got introduced to me, which was really beautiful. So I had a technical background of coding. And then I stepped into the mortgage world and banking, financing, and account executive, and all of the things for banks. And that probably decade until I went back into, and technically I was funding the real estate, Sean was doing the real estate. It's about then, around 2010, when I started marrying technology with finance and money from a different way. There's something different that you learn about the business that you're in when it's your money that's funding it. When you work for somebody else, you have an understanding. When it's your money, you have an appreciation of what it is that you're doing, especially when you build multiple projects. And so that world kind of taught me, how to speak finance. It taught me how to speak technology, and then it taught me how to speak CEO. So now I'm pretty versed on all of it, which saves us a lot of time, a lot of money, where I'm just a really good translator between the different worlds. What had ended up happening is about 2013, I'm now going through my second divorce. I'm like, man, this is going on technology. This is spiritual communities. About the same time, I owned a media company, and we would buy and sell clicks. And we would sell people our product. And then I had other people waiting to buy the names and emails of the people that bought my products. We would just hundreds, if not thousands of them on a day, and just maneuver through this world. And so I'm in this space. I feel really good about 95% of that business, and 5% not so much. But to me, in that world, 95% was good enough. I'm like, I feel really good about 95% of it. And at the same time, I'm going through a second divorce going, man, I felt really good about 95% of it, but there's 5% that I couldn't figure out. And so it was the first time that I really decided to take a hard look about me. How did I show up? What was I doing? What were my triggers? What were my misgivings? What were my shortcomings? And could I work through those? This opened up a window. It originally started with a guy named Garrett White out of Southern California. He runs a company called Wake Up Warrior. And he'd called me, and I'd known him for a couple of years, and he'd been a client of mine on another technology that I owned. And I'm like, Garrett, man, I'm trying to figure out my brain. Can you teach me meditation? He was doing this kind of world. And he said, no, go read a book. It's like, oh, thanks, buddy. And about 2 months later, he calls me back and said, hey, I have this idea. I want to create this men's only personal development company. And, you and 5 other people will start it, and we'll kind of work through the different scenarios that's happening to an entrepreneur through life's ups and downs. Because it seems to be, although everybody's issues seem to be a little bit different, but the result and the way to get through them seems to be the same. So we're like, let's find some patterns. And this started a love-hate develop a relationship with my own mind.
Sure.
A few years to dive into it pretty deep. And once I did, I realized how much control I was giving other people over my thoughts, which managed my feelings, which managed my actions, meaning all of the triggers. It was the way that you're raised, what your church taught you, what your parents taught you, what you witnessed. All of those create what they just call subconscious programming. Those are the hows and whys you tick. And I didn't like the fact that I wasn't in control of most of the situations that were happening in my life. Not that I can control a situation, but I can dang sure control how I respond and react to those. This was kind of deep. This thing led me studying. I lived with monks. I went and studied in these hidden and underground temples in Italy, which it's like Indiana Jones to get into it. But once you do, they're exquisite. Huge buildings with these like amazing tile inlay floors and mosaics through the walls. It was really quite incredible. That led me to plant medicine ceremonies in South America, and it really exploring what's happening inside of my own mind. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I ran into who became a teacher of mine. And I'm just going to share the truth, right?
Yeah,
of the situation.
Please.
This moment in time, I'm writing code. And whenever I would get stuck on one of our softwares, I would dive into psilocybin. And it has a unique perspective of turning off your front and forward thinking capabilities. How do I solve my future by going back into the past? And allows you to think unilaterally. So I would write on this, come up with some new solutions. And she says, Greg, what would you do if you didn't have this tool? I said, well, I don't know. She goes, I'd like to teach you, but it's going to take a few years for you to get through this. Now, by this time, I had decided that I would sell, not from her, but from my own piece. I got rid of all my belongings here in the United States, all except a car and 12 boxes that I kept in a storage unit. I sold the Ferrari, I sold the house, I got rid of the limo, I got rid of all of these things, which were my 95%, 5% lifestyle. I was like, I'm not happy. I'm at the top of my, what I thought was my game, stressed. I remember laying under the desk at my office multiple occasions thinking I had ulcers because of the stress that was on me. And I didn't want my employees to know that I was going through this because I had to show up a certain way. And there's got to be other ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I decided that I would move to Mexico and go study with the Mayans for a couple of years. And that ended up being a little over 3 years. And during that time, this teacher steps in. She goes, I'm going to teach you some things, but you're going to have to make 3 commitments to me. I'm like, great, what are they? She says, first, you can't cut your hair for 3 years, for 3. I'm like, okay, what's the reason? And she gave me the reason. And I'll share what the real reason, what I got from that in a minute. The second one was no drugs, no plant medicine, no alcohol, nothing but base survival food for 3 years, no hormones, no antibiotics, like just getting rid of everything out of the cells. And the third was no sex of any kind for 3 years. No self, no other person. You're just going to learn how to be you. And I completed it. And what I got out of that is, for the first time when I grew my hair out, I looked like this, right? I was always trained that if I wanted love, I needed to look a certain way. If I needed money, I needed to look a certain way. I went wild, like really long hair, big beard, down the middle of my back. It helped me shed some of those things that every time when you look in the mirror and somebody told you for 20, 30 years, this is what you need to be. So you make sure you frame yourself that way. It helped me lose those subconscious programs or connections. The no antibiotics, no drugs, no plant medicine, that was actually pretty dang easy. But it really helped me rebalance my hormone system. I was on testosterone therapy before. I wasn't after, by the time I was clear or done. It just helped me realize what my food addictions are. As an example, I know now that if I crave chocolate, one of 2 things are happening. I either want it because I crave it, or I'm sad. I didn't know this before, so I would just eat chocolate, not knowing that I'm feeding an emotional addiction to food. But I learned that through this process. And the last one taught me how to have really impactful relationships where any kind of intimacy was never even the conversation. Even though as a man, it's not about running around and, sleeping with a bunch of people or doing crazy things. But the way that I was trained, what I saw growing up, the television that it always seems to be framed in a sexual manner. And it helped me clear those things. And so then after I come back out of the jungle, because I was living in the jungle that time, in and out, I would come back every 5 weeks to Utah, would be here for a week, and then I would go back. It put me in such a clean place that I decided that I wasn't going to do any business that I didn't feel 100% on. And I wouldn't be part of relationships that I wasn't part of 100% on. It got me to be this really clear person where it's not money, it's not, women, it's not drugs. There's not an outside experience that can make me do something that isn't my own choice, where before it really wasn't like that. It was a little wild.
That's wild. How intense that must have been. What was it like coming home every 5 weeks with your hair growing out and all these, probably lingering desires?
That part was probably the easiest part because I was still in the middle of it. I've learned how, when I make a commitment, that I keep it. There are times where, you follow a commitment to its end and you're like, oh, okay, I've worked it through there. There's no other possibilities. But in the past, I would work it until I didn't feel like it.
Right.
And so I'm in the middle of it. That was fine. Coming out after I was done, that one was a little wild. I really didn't want to spend that much time with humans. I don't want to talk to people. You're in this like total meditative state. My last year was teaching myself how to meditate for 14 hours a day, one practice. And that was all about mastering the sounds and the words and the thoughts that are in the mind, so that I want to open an email and write an email, I can write it without, squirrel and doing all these things. So coming out of it, that last part where I knew I was home, it took me about 6 months to really want to get involved. If I were to liken it to the Matrix, that conversation, about Neo, and once he started seeing how the world was interacting around him, he chose how he wanted to interact. Well, when I was coming back, I talked to friends and family, and I could see their core wounds, those things that were hurting them the most, that they wouldn't look at and didn't want to talk about it. And that was a little bit hard for a little while, until you just realize that, anybody else's pain is their pain. It's not your pain. There's no judgment to it. There's no thought. So it was kind of a process working back into an office, working into like creation mode.
But what I'd be curious about, I'm sure this is a discipline that you learned listening to you, and I've never done anything like that, obviously. Well, not obviously, but I've not done anything like that. But many rounds of 75 hard. But how do you develop the tolerance? Like you just said, you can see these wounds and these pains that other people have. How do you develop the tolerance for other people and what they're doing? And you're just going, man, if they only knew, because you can't fix everybody. And this goes both personal and in business. You've got to interact on both sides of the fence. How do you build that?
Yeah. There's a term that I would use a lot, which is, if I judge you, I have to judge me, and I'm unwilling to judge me anymore. Which is kind of a philosophy that just says, if I see somebody going through something, that's their path, right? And I might even be judging it wrong if I try to judge it. I'm not in their lens. I'm not in their world. Could I want more for them? Sure. But I stopped going. Part of the whole cycle was learning how to be less judgmental about me, the way I looked, how I operated, sometimes how I walked, how I spoke. I grew up dyslexic. So then there was like, did I spell it right? Are people going to judge me? All of the judgments that are just on you all the time. I wasn't willing to do that anymore. So I couldn't do it against anybody else. Or by default, I would have to bring that back to me.
I'll use this question to transition a little bit, but do you find yourself kind of this superhuman as it relates to, hey, I've got a job to do now, and I know I'm crystal clear on what that looks like? I mean, are you using those tools to be that person?
Yeah. It's an interesting process, because I'm more crystal on being able to create the plan and then bring the people in, and less judgmental about how it needs to look every day. So you normally create a business plan and you're like, okay, here are my check marks that I have to have. Here are the things here's how it needs to look. But again, that's a judgment, right? Based on past experiences, I'd say, well, I've built 87 platforms in the past. They should all operate the same. I got rid of that. So I can still bring in the right people and we can move forward, but it allows you to move and shift and make changes on the fly without judgment. Oh, I shouldn't have hired that person. Oh, I should have done this. Oh, those things that happen. But this kind of philosophy and this mindset doesn't really account for it. You're still responsible for the things that you do, but it's less judgment and more just reaction.
I suppose I do have one more question that would be a tool to others. Not everybody has the luxury to go disappear for 3 years or the financial means to go do what you did. Is there any one or two takeaways that you would advise people to go through to kind of even touch the surface, if you will?
For sure. And I would never suggest anybody do what I did. Never. I was at the frame of mind that something awesome had to be extremely hard. I don't believe that anymore. Let me teach you a practice, you and everybody that's on, whether they're watching or they're listening. Let me share with you something that you can do 5 to 10 minutes a day and then explain why.
Yeah.
This is the main meditation practice that I was working on for hours and hours to building up to that 14-hour time frame. So basically, if you were you don't need to close your eyes now, but just imagine that you would about maybe 6 to 12 inches away from your face, you're going to envision a round clock. And one with the numbers, it's not digital. So it starts at noon, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It goes around. And you take a minute and kind of frame that into your visual. And some people are super visual and some people are not, but it's the same process that you go through. And you put that clock out there. With your eyes closed, you take the small hand and the big hand and you place it at 12. And the whole time you're meditating, you open your phone, set a 5-minute, a 10-minute alarm, and you hold 12 o'clock. So what's happened as humans is we try to orient ourselves in time and space at all the times. Like you wake up in the morning and for some reason, and maybe not everybody, but I used to, I wonder like, oh, do I have the same amount of money in my bank account? Oh, do I have the same problem that I had before I went to sleep? Well, every one of these numbers in the psychology of the human means something. Money, love, work, fulfillment, the things. And what happens with it, it's like watching, you remember MTV?
Yeah.
So MTV coined this topic of edit it like an MTV music video, which meant every 3 seconds, something was going to change. A downbeat, an upbeat, change in the color of the background, change in the color of the piece, because they learned that the more you can teach people's minds to move, the longer that they're willing to stay. This is why TikTok is destroying the brain. Is people are able to focus longer than those couple of seconds. They're training themselves repetitively over and over and over. And so being able to hold 12, you start teaching your mind that these things that pop up all the time aren't natural, that you're able to hold that focus. And for me, if I'm in conversation with somebody, I know where that spot is. Like for me, the spot is right around the center of the head. And this isn't like a woo-woo third eye component. This is just where 12 o'clock is for me. And if I start shifting, I'm not actually present with them. I'm thinking about what they're going to say, or how does that impact me? Or, what's for lunch? But as long as I can hold this, then I'm present with them. And this just creates a whole new way of living. And it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I love it. I've had a lot of people on this year, different topics as guests, but many of them have gravitated towards mindfulness and meditation and all these practices that you're talking about. So thank you for sharing that portion of your life and what you went through. That you've already got a few nuggets. If you're listening, pay attention, take some notes. All right. I want to talk about Jedari because a couple of years ago in the middle of our COVID pandemic nationally, of course, I'm in Montana. We didn't participate here for the most part. I saw a lot of hopelessness around the country in our young adults. Montana does have one of the highest suicide rates. A lot of that comes from our Indian reservations. And I felt like I needed to do something for our youth. And I'd already been a business coach, and that always naturally falls into a little bit of life coaching here and there. And I went to a friend, I said, look, let's create a group where we can help young adults. And we established the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate. Now, we were using a bunch of tools between the website and Zoom and email servers and different things like that. And I start seeing Sean blasting out. It wasn't connected to you at the time, Greg, but I see Sean blasting out like, I'm going to have the platform of the future, like I'm going to white label this. Now, I'd already been on Sean's platform, Lion's Den, and had participated with that. I thought, well, if it's anything like that, it's probably going to be pretty good because I like that platform. And as I learned more and more, then your name came into the picture. I'm like, oh, we got another guy here that knows his shit. Let's see what happens here. And you guys effectively launched Jedari. And I fell in love from day one because of the components, what you offer, and what I can deliver in my quest to help young adults. So maybe you can just introduce what it is, how you and Sean solve some problems, and kind of where this company's going forward moving.
Perfect. You just gave me a great segment where you said what I can deliver. That's what you can deliver to your users, your clients, the people that you're supporting. This starts almost 6 years ago in the middle of the jungle space and in and out. And I'll make that really short. I created a platform where the only reason that people would log on is to either have group live streaming meditations or group prayers. You have families scattered all around the world, and they're trying to use Facebook or cell phones to come in and do these really like sacred, intimate things for their family. And there wasn't anything out there that really catered to that was very, energetically clean, if you will. So I created this program. I ran it for a year, funded all the build, launched out on iOS, Android, ran it for a year. I ran about 800 sessions, meditations myself for people all over the world. And when I was done, I was like, why aren't people using this? This is like a tool that just impacts the globe. Why? And as I was closing it, because it just didn't make sense to keep it going, the answer really came to me, which was I hadn't created it in a way that would make, if the content creator, the person holding the prayer, the person holding the meditation, the class, I hadn't created a way for them to make money. There was no way to monetize on it. And so as a systems architect, I'm like, I'm never building anything again that's not designed around, wealth or strategy or sharing resources or receiving value. And so I get back out of the jungle. I'm here for about a year, maybe 6 months. And Sean calls me and says, hey, I have a problem. Can you come hang out? Come to my house and let's talk. And he outlined his business model, which was he was delivering coaching or content through a closed Facebook group, but his credit card system was connected to a landing page system that wasn't connected to Facebook because Facebook didn't allow any kind of, business automations. They're like, hey, anybody going to make money on Facebook? It's me. So they just weren't designing it for e-commerce and to support other people. It was designed to support them. So he showed me the problems. He needed an application. He needed live streaming. He wanted direct messaging and a couple other components and billing wrapped in. I was like, well, it's a tall order. Let me see what I can do. I went out and I found a couple of different softwares that I could hodgepodge together to make what was then Lions Not Sheep work. And we launched it, and it allowed Sean, to 3 times the X amount of users. That's 3 times X his revenue, because now there was a billing system that was integrated automatically into the fulfillment system, and that was his live streaming and his communication. And we ran that, and I didn't want to build anything else. I'm at the point in my career where I will spend as much time as possible not building something. You just dive into it, and all of a sudden you're 6 months into it, you're 3 times over budget, and you realize somebody else created something that's pretty dang good and you can use it. So
Sure.
He's like, hey, can you add these things? And I went to the companies we were using, and it wasn't going to be a possibility, even though we were paying huge sums of money to utilize these platforms. Came back and said, Sean, we got 2 things to do, or one of 2 options. Number one, we have to build our own. And here's what I think it's going to cost. Here's the time. And it's, not only just my fee to design it, architect and manage it, but here's the coders and designers. And it would take Lions Not Sheep several years to recoup the funds for this investment. Doesn't make sense to me, and I don't want to build it. He goes, great. What if we build an app company? I went, okay, so let's add another 0 and to the end of that price tag to build, and let's add another 6 months to a year to the process. But if we do it, what I can do is I can take all the information from this project that I had to close and redesign one so that it doesn't matter what type of information or content or community wanted to have information shared, if it was live prayer or meditation or training kids, running a presidential campaign on their own platform. Doesn't matter. I could utilize those skills and make sure that we architected that every single person can receive some form of revenue. That's us. That's our affiliates, the people that send us traffic or do referrals. That's you being a community manager. And then inside your community, if you choose to use it, there's a referral section built in that allows you to gift out a percentage of what somebody else referred to you. A person came in and you're like, hey, 20% of whatever you refer in, I'll give back to you, so they can receive value. And like, now every person that touches the platform could receive value. So when that hit, and it was scheduled for everybody, 4 ways that people can win, then I could go and justify what it would take to build live streaming services, to redesign what the large social media companies spent billions of doing or building. We didn't have that. We had a minimal amount of time, and we had to rebuild what these huge platforms could do, and in a way that I could easily hand it over to somebody like you and say, hey, this isn't Facebook, this is Jedari. But in reality, your clients will never know Jedari exists. It's going to have your logo on it. It's going to have your URL. It's going to be your information, your emails. It had nothing really to do about us. We were just providing a tool that worked really well for Sean and Lions Not Sheep. So that was kind of the selling point, even though it was not something that I really wanted to do. And what came from that, the conversations that we're having now, another layer opened up to this, and that's COVID hit, and all of the restrictions and the shadow banning and the blockings and, deleting private Facebook groups because of what they're talking about. And we were like, oh man, there are an unlimited amount of reasons that somebody could use a platform where it's my job to make sure that it runs, and it's also my job to protect the data.
Yeah.
I'm not tracking anybody. I don't know what's happening in your community. You're in charge of that. We're not policing that, but we're protecting that there's no extra code written in there that, blocks things out. And right now in the world that we live in, this is super powerful to be able to have, because everywhere we turn, we're like, well, I guess I can't say that. I can't do that. And it didn't make sense. And so, I put this up to the divine that we were already working on this during this. And now that we come out of it, we're like, wow, this really has a lot of use cases for a lot of different communities.
You touched on a few really important things worth mentioning, especially at the beginning of the story. You talked about monetizing, these classes, these, meditations and stuff like that. And, for the naive listener, by the way, when you monetize, you create sustainability. I created an import company for wine just so we can sustainably give to orphanages in Mexico. And people are like, well, why would you create a business? Why not just donate? Well, what are they going to do when I'm gone? And so I love that was part of the mission, and the ability to monetize what people are doing through a really simple platform. I know we're not huge right now with our personal stuff with Jedari, but are you seeing early monetization with companies? I mean, your observations, you got people jumping in. How's that looking so far?
Yeah, well, we're say roughly 105 days in since we launched, right?
Mm-hmm.
We opened that up to the general public. It's January 1. As this is recorded, it's the 17th of April. And last week we hit our first $1 million, which is $1 million clients charged to their users. So we had $1 million monetized in the first a little over 3 months on the platform. That's not our money. That's your money. That's what other people are receiving by using this. This was a huge number to us, being like, yeah, this is not only it's working, but a lot of people are saying, oh, okay, now I can see how and why. Especially to have all these pieces integrated. It's so difficult not to. You can run things off of Discord, but it's horrible. But you can.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick, because you're hearing Discord more and more these days. I'm not in the tech world, but now all of a sudden, the last 4 months, I hear that name pop up everywhere. I don't have a Discord account. I heard it on Fox News last week. I'm like, okay, I guess everybody's on it. The news is talking. Why is that a default mechanism for membership groups right now? Because I looked at it, it's like, wow, this is pretty complex, and there's all kinds of extra junk in here compared to what I see from my own Jedari platform. Like, this is easy.
Sure. There are a bunch of products out there and programs that created something that's free. There's always going to be a reason for things that are free.
Yeah.
The Discords and the Telegrams and the WhatsApps and the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and there's always going to be a need for that. Even companies like Patreon, who allows you to, put your content, your flat content. It's not a community management system, but put your flat content out and sell it. And there's beautiful things about them. Discord in particular was originally created so that anybody could anonymously join a group. So no names, no phone numbers, no nothing. Like they protect that. And they were doing it mainly in the crypto community space, so the cryptocurrency spaces. It was a way for, as Sean and I have an NFT project that we sold out last year, and it's a way that we could connect to that community, the tech community, the crypto community, in ways that they would understand. But it was designed to be like a file sharing product. It looks something like we would assume Windows 95 looked like.
Yeah.
And it's stuck and that it works. It was never designed to run your business. It was designed to be a file share and information sharing system, which is great until you start talking about e-commerce and sustainably creating a company, and forget about logoing it or making it your own piece, because it's not in their charter on their creation, but it's free. So there's great uses for it, but it wasn't designed to be familiar and user friendly. It was designed to share files and information.
And by the way, early success that you guys have had so far, I mean, the early messaging was, hey, we can only take on 50 people to start with. So even then, people probably had their brakes on until you open up those doors. So pretty impressive how far you've gotten. I'm going to start to wrap this up a little bit because we've gone probably a little bit over that normal time. But I just, I appreciate both sides, your personal story and the value that you brought there. And I appreciate what Jedari's doing. Could you just highlight some of the things that people get with the Jedari platform? I know what they are, but I'd rather hear them come from you to our public audience.
Sure. If I were to hit like a quick features list, like things, first, we've talked about it. Everything from us is white labeled. So it's your logo, your brand, your components. We found out through watching Facebook and the other communities that people really love to share content. It's less about one person selling a pre-recorded video and more about the communities getting access to each other. So we created the social walls, those feeds that you decided, or that, we've kind of come to love. There's also an unlimited amount of private groups, so sub-contents that work like, a group that you'd find on social media. We have live streaming capability. So instead of going to Zoom and pre-setting up a call and emailing out everybody, you just open your phone and hit send and everybody's notified that you're live, that type of a thing. Mm-hmm. There is a direct messaging component. So it's this whole economy of communications. So imagine you're a company and you don't want your users or your employees to go to Facebook for all of your conversations, for your video uploads, your shares, direct messagings, your stories, those things that you throw up on Instagram, all of those. And you want it just to be your employees. It's the same as if you have a coaching company, you want it just to be yours so that you can kind of frame the narrative, like kind of control what that conversation is like. So we took all of those tools, plus a few more that, we've kind of hit on and is probably a little too deep for this conversation. And we redesigned it all and basically miniaturized it so that we could give it to other people, and we manage it and we host it. So one of the most impactful things is to not have to know code in order to create something, or, not to be in a difficult manner. So there was a lot of focus put on this where everything is point and click, change some text, change the color, logo. It's all pretty simple, but it was meant to really allow communities to have that full experience versus I go to this app for this conversation, I go to this app for that conversation. It was meant to be all inclusive in one, easy to understand container.
Yeah, I'll give you two compliments from our own interaction. This is, messaging for the listeners too. First of all, we don't have a tech person on our team. I told you how we started it, two guys trying to put something together. Our third partner is a marketing expert, but she's not a tech guru either. However, with your platform, she was able to, working with your team, integrate all of our branding, all of our content, all of our needs through a series of email conversations and uploads where our site looks like it was programmed just for us with all of our stuff. I know that that's with intent on your side, but I want to affirm how user-friendly it was and how great the staff was.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Two things we care a lot about: our staff and the usability.
Just curious, your growth in that arena, because look, it's a heavy lift up front and then it kind of tapers off, and I saw a lot of that heavy lifting from my team. How do you scale that growth as you guys start to grow? You start adding bodies that can accommodate more customers?
Yeah. On the technical side, we built out the first version that in the tech space, it's called the MVP, the minimal viable product. What's that? Mm-hmm. And then in reality, we run it and we just put lots of users on it. And then we say, cool, how could we do it better? And there are things that we've rebuilt since you've been on here that you have no idea about, but it makes it run smoother. And so we just continue to automate. It is adding more bodies, to our place. It's half of our team is internal, half of our team is work from home. We'll eventually bring everybody in because there's more synergy in those aspects. But from there, we perfect what we have, and then we just start marketing, because we really haven't even opened up a market segment other than just telling our one market, hey, we have something that works really well, and now it's available for you too. To this date, we've onboarded 48 businesses since we started. That's been pretty from our one market.
Awesome. Well, I'll close with this compliment. We love our page. I particularly like the gamification area and what that is. You know, if you're not familiar with the term, it's an area where we can go in and we've got our critical tasks for the day. Our members can check those tasks. And I think maybe we took a little bit part of your playbook. The first one is gratitude. You know, write down things that you're grateful for, exercises on there, helping somebody else is on there, writing down your goals, reviewing your goals. These are to us all important for us to teach. And I just love that because then it categorizes people by their participation and how often they're doing those things. And people can actually see their grade compared to other people and how much they're participating. So I love that feature. So I appreciate that. I'm sure you've got a comment about it, but it was a good idea.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's perfect. Any kind of accountability for your community it's epic. And as a coach, if you don't have any kind of feedback, you're unable to support people in ways when you do have data and you're able to see what their triggers or their sticking points are. It's something that hadn't been created in an environment like this before. So another one of those things where we just have to have it. Nobody would build it for us.
Yeah, no, it's great. And what we're going to do with it is those that are participating like at a 70% or higher level it's going to open up more doors for them, more access for like personal one-on-one coaching type things, because it shows us here's people that care, they're willing to put in the work, and we want to give them the support for that extra work, right? But if you can't even do the checklist every day, how are you going to do what you're being asked, to do in the time? So
fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea.
There you go. You can have it. Add it to your other clients. Look, I'm going to say this and then we'll wrap it up is the affordability of the program. Go on the Jedari site. You can read through the options, but it is almost too easy to jump in and do something with this platform. If you have a membership group or you're interested in coaching, or you're just looking to start a new business and you have a niche somewhere where you can, bring members together, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Jedari platform and everything that's there. So Greg, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's good to connect.
My pleasure. And please, if you like the podcast, share it with a friend. We got to get this information out there. And I was welcomed at Greg's office last week by all his team, and they've got a wonderful place in just outside of Salt Lake. So Greg, have a great afternoon.
Thank you for listening to today's show.
Thanks so much.
It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen. And thank you, and have a great week.